And welcome to another edition of Collectors Hangout. In this episode, we're going to be talking with Jason Rodgers. Jason is the artisan and the man behind Fez-O-Rama. He loves lots of different areas of geeky things, and we're going to actually get into that. But of course, he's most well known on the internet and going to a lot of conventions for the fezzes that he makes. So I'm glad that we're able to have you in Collectors Hangout, and welcome, Jason.
Thank you, Domingo. This is really cool.
It's actually been kind of very cool to be able to have you actually on Collectors Hangout, because I had mentioned Fez-O-Rama in one of my very early episodes of Collectors Hangout. And I never thought that I would actually have you actually on as a guest.
Oh, so cool.
it's very cool to have you in as a guest.
It's my pleasure.
So one of the things that I had noticed is that in doing the research, with Fez-O-Rama and of course with you, you've been actually doing this for close to, was it now going on 9+ years or?
Yeah, I think we actually just passed our 10th year. So this would be starting in 11 as an official business. I started making fezzes for my friends years before that.
Okay, so you actually were making them outside of a business, almost like a hobby or as gifts for much longer.
Yeah, I started. I want to say like 1999, 98, like Christmas.
Okay.
Of 99, I want to say. Or maybe it was 98 Christmas, and then 99 was the first year I was doing it. Then yeah, it started. Well, the full background story. I was recovering from cancer treatments, and I like to make Christmas presents. I had no money. My girlfriend, who is now, of course, my wife, bought me fabric, and I made my friends fezzes for Christmas, and that was their like gift. And it started like an instant secret society with like 8 fezzes I made that year. And then throughout that year, I would, like at birthday parties, I would just present somebody with a fez, and I did that for a number of years before starting to do outside stuff for other people.
Okay. All right. So the secret society, is there still a secret society, portion of it that you can allude to, or that you have just gone public with?
It was called the Cult of the Eye, and
okay.
We were active for probably a decade. We're still in touch. We're just not as active anymore because life gets in the way, and people have children and change jobs and move and things like that.
Yeah.
But there's still a number of us who we're still in touch. It was one of those things where we would go out, we would all get dressed up, we'd go out bowling. Like for somebody's birthday party, we'd go out bowling, fully dressed up, and just to be fun and obnoxious. And the person who all of us were wearing fezzes, but like I made a bishop's mitre for the person whose birthday it was, so they had to wear the bishop's mitre and robes while they were bowling. And we'd either get accused of being a band, which I always never quite grasped, but anytime we were dressed up, they're like, "Are you guys a band?" Or we get stopped and asked, "Where'd you get the fezzes?" And they'd say, "Oh, I made them." And then the next question, of course, was, "How much are they, or do you sell them?" So for years of dodging that question, and said, "Oh no, I just make them for my friends," which in the beginning sounded humble and insincere, which is what, it's like, no, I just make them for my friends. This isn't what I do full time. But after a while, it started sounding like, in my head, it would sound like, I just make them for my friends and you're not my friend. So it started like kind of being off-putting to me to hear that, have to say that over and over again. And a few of us were doing an art show, and we had brought art and we're wearing our fezzes, and people were more interested in the fezzes than in the art I brought. So it was like, no, stop. No, I'm not selling the hats. Look at this artwork. So the next year at that art show, I brought a couple dozen hats, and they sold out. So after that, the next year at that same art show, I brought more of the fezzes, and they did really well. And I had the idea that, I should, number one, talk with my friend Joe, who was taking care of like organizing money and stuff at the event. and talk to him about maybe starting, make this a business. So at least we're paying taxes and being on the up and up.
Yeah.
And we can put together a website that would just sell whatever doesn't sell at the art show. And very quickly, I didn't really grasp the idea that a website is international and, anybody can access it. Because very, very quickly, I was suddenly panicking about less about trying to sell off the Fezes and more about I need to make Fezes because my website's going to be empty soon. So it just sort of like slowly snowballed organically over many years. So I did it as a sideline for about 8 of those years. And I'm in my 3rd year of doing it full time.
Okay. All right. So going back to when you were actually doing this at art shows, so you were getting more interest in, of course, the hats themselves versus the artwork that you had, of course, brought to the show. What kind of artwork were you doing? Was it your own artwork, or were you also representing other artists that you had sourced and you were trying to sell?
Oh no, it was all my own stuff. I was doing different graphics, simple stuff. And it would be like I had some embroidered shirts, so I was already playing around with embroidery at that point. Doing embroidered shirts and stickers and small illustration, that kind of thing. But more people were interested in the Cult of the Eye Fez that I was wearing than what we were. The other artwork. I had like some sandblasted glassware that I did with some of my designs on it. Just random things that we were playing around with at the time. And it just seemed like, I got a lot of, questions. Oh, but are you selling the Fezes? And there was only 3 or 4 of us wearing them at this big event, but they just sort of struck a nerve.
Okay. That's really cool. So the way that you got into the art, that's what I'm also trying to understand, where did you become interested in, number one, sewing, because that's something that, unless you're going into more of like the fashion industry or costumes and stuff like that, most guys, it's sad to say, don't normally pick up an interest in doing stuff with, sewing. Now I myself had done, this was back in when I was, still in middle school. I thought, I'll try to, do something with cross point. So my mom got me this cross point cross stitch kit, and I made that. But that was about it, except for learning how to sew on buttons. So where did your interest in art and also sewing come from?
Well, my mom sewed. My mom, both my parents are a real maker personalities. So I kind of grew up, lower middle class. And if there was something that you wanted, you made it. So as opposed to going out and buying it. And so I was always surrounded by that idea. My dad was a carpenter and, construction and welding and things like that. And my mom did a little of everything. When I was a little kid, she did some sculpture and jewelry. She also worked in construction and did welding and metalwork and things like that.
Wow.
More utilitarian than art based. But when I was really young, my mom did a lot of would do art fairs and paint and stuff like that. So that was one area of exposure. The other huge influence on me is Jim Henson. So knowing that Kermit was sewn from a felt jacket. So, the interest in sewing came from the same place that I got a lot of my influences on art. I always, I loved to draw as a kid and still do. So I was always doing art, but I think the making things physical was always interesting to me, and sewing was part of that. So growing up, costumes was a really big deal for me. I would draw a little cartoon character. My mom would turn that into a Halloween costume. So I kind of got used to that idea. And then by the time I got through high school, I realized that, I would have to start doing some of that work myself. And I did modifications, and I made my punk jeans and things like that, in denim jackets and stuff, messing around with things in high school. But I was still depending on my mom to do the heavy lifting on actual sewing if I designed a shirt or a jacket or something like that. So when I got into college, that was one of the things I knew I wanted to learn. And I was studying I studied theater with an interest in costume design.
Okay.
So in college, I was doing that, and then I went from studying theater, and then decided that I really wanted to study how clothing was made. So I went to school for a fashion degree.
Okay.
Um, Throughout that whole process, I've always had a fascination with hats. So while I was in the costume department, I was studying millinery work and making hats and armor and shoes and anything I could, get my hands on to learn. Um, so it all ties back into stuff that I was interested in as a kid.
Mm-hmm.
It just kind of a roundabout way. So eventually it just became, I needed a creative outlet to explore graphic design and also to realize it in a physical form, beyond just printing something on my computer.
Mm-hmm. And then how did your fascination specifically with the hats that, of course, are known as fezzes? And from my understanding, correct me if I'm wrong, the history about fezzes was it was mostly used among those in kind of the Eastern Europe, and then also the Eastern Europe, and then also the Gulf countries, and then for some countries it was even outlawed for reasons, of course, mainly around religion or the ties to, of course, who normally, of course, was wearing them at that point in time. Am I getting that history mixed up, or is that close
No,
to?
I mean that's pretty accurate. It's a really fascinating. It's from a historical standpoint. The fez is fascinating. It's just an icon, right? I mean, it's a hat. They believe it's originally a Phoenician hat.
Mm-hmm.
It spread throughout the Mediterranean, Northern Africa, Eastern Europe, just like you said. Some countries outlawed it. Some countries adopted it. They're still like, don't go to Greece wearing a fez. They're still a little peeved about Circe's and burning down their cities. So they they tie that to something that's over 500 years ago, and it's still an issue. So because our business partner Joe was on a cruise, and security wouldn't let him take a photograph wearing his fez.
Wow.
They just kept saying no hat, no hat, no hat, and he finally figured out that, oh, okay, I see. Like, it's a cultural thing, but it's a cultural thing from over half a century ago.
Yeah.
Um, a lot of the Western knowledge of the fez comes from Turkey, but Turkey only had it for one generation. So they adopted it at the end of the 18th century and got rid of it by like the 1920s. I don't know the exact dates, but and that was an attempt to Westernize. So they were all wearing turbans. They wanted to kind of update the country's look, and the Turk was educated in the West, came back, kind of had to have a debate with the religious leaders over what would be appropriate, and they settled on the fez. So the fez was like a compromise between the secular and the religious aspect of the country. But the next generation, when the Ataturk came into power, he wanted to Westernize again. They couldn't agree on a hat, so he just banned the fez, and that was it. So,
Okay.
so it's just one of those interesting things. But the reason that's so well known is that they had these white sand beaches, and people in Europe would travel to the beaches of Turkey as a resort location, not really immersing themselves in the culture of Turkey, but just going to those beach locations. Then they'd bring
Yeah.
back this exotic hat, or bring back a souvenir hat with them. But
And
for us in the West, it has a lot to do with entertainment.
yeah.
So classic movies. For me, huge Marx Brothers fan. So Night in Casablanca, Groucho's wearing a fez the entire time, and obviously Casablanca. Laurel and Hardy, Sons of the Desert, which was sort of a parody on the fraternal orders, like the Shriners.
Mm-hmm.
So they all had
Mm-hmm.
fezzes. So it's one of those things where it just was always kind of percolating in the background of what I remember about entertainment and history. And it was just sort of a running gag kind of thing, because you'd see a lot of jokes, like the convention guys partying in their tuxedos and a fez and totally drunk. And so it was one of those things that just sort of like, it was passed like hand down through through subcultures. And you realize that it's in a lot of subcultures. It's not just a specific, like, it's not a rockabilly hat or it's not a punk hat. It's something that almost all subcultures have some kind of reference to.
Yeah, yeah, and getting into subcultures, I think a lot of people, that might be watching the show, if they weren't familiar with necessarily, seeing lots of people with Fezes, might have seen the Fez on Doctor Who. That's
Yeah.
probably the most recent reference.
That you have Gravity Falls.
Gravity Falls. Okay, I didn't know that
Which
it was.
is, I mean, I have kind of a unique experience because I'm the guy on the other side of the table talking to
Yeah.
all of these people. So I get to see where people are getting their reference points from. So, older generations, it's Happy Days. Richie's father was a member of the Leopards, and they wore Fezes. Like I said, for me, it was old movies showing, showing on television all weekend
Yeah.
long that I just loved. So Laurel and Hardy and Marx Brothers and things like that. So it's really interesting. Phineas and Ferb had an episode, brilliant episode that featured Fezes.
I'm sorry, you broke up there. Who again?
Oh, Phineas and Ferb. So a Disney cartoon, Phineas and Ferb, had Temple of What You Doing was the episode. And it's hilarious. And a lot of great Fez jokes and references in it. So, it's one of those things where, like I said, it's one of those things that's sort of everywhere.
All right, I haven't heard of.
Realize until you start watching.
Sorry, I kept on interjecting. I haven't heard a Fez joke, so if you know any good Fez jokes, definitely let's close out the episode with a good Fez
I can't say I really collected the Fez jokes. I'm trying to remember. There's a couple. They're mostly references that would pop out at me. There's an episode of Law and Order that, and I'm of course blanking on the names of the actors and the characters.
Yeah, that's no worry.
But he's arresting somebody, and the guy's like, "What am I being arrested for?" And he explains that it's like a child endangerment or something. The guy's like, "You must be joking," and his response was, "If I was joking, I'd be wearing a fez and no pants." Which is just one of those kind of like, why is that appropriate? And yet it is. And it gives you kind of an idea of how the Fez is like respected and also disrespected throughout, different areas. And that was always what interested me about it, because it was just sort of this weird, silly hat that was given a whole lot of importance. So, it's a fairly simple hat, but it almost has like that, in some areas it carries the pretentious nature of like a Napoleonic military cap, where they get ridiculously tall and they've got ribbons and ropes and tassels and everything on them. So it's sort of like this, like really serious and really silly at the same time.
Yeah, no, completely. So with the way that you, of course, now as a business owner, since you've been doing this for 3+ years, what's your normal process of going through and coming up with the designs? And we can get into some of those designs through a screen share, and of course some photos that you were so gracious to share with us.
Oh, sure. Well, it's always been, so for the, I don't know, many years that I've done this now, it's always just sort of started with pencil sketches. So it's always just me doodling in my sketchbook, coming up with graphics, which I've always had an interest in. I've always liked to play around with logo design and graphic design, as well as, full realized fashion design and sculpture and stuff like that. But I like to just sort of sketch concepts. And I do a lot of Illustrator and Photoshop and things, and things like that in the past. So that's still part of my work process. So a lot of times when I'm sketching on my sketchbook, I'm thinking like how I would adapt this to a vector drawing or, the process. So the typical process for me is a pencil sketch. A lot of times I'll decide in the sketch whether there's going to be a symmetrical design or not. So a lot of the stuff I do is very symmetrical. And a lot of times I'll kind of play with that, and some of them will be completely not symmetrical designs. I kind of push myself out of my comfort zone, but my comfort zone I've noticed is a very symmetrical layout. So pencil sketch, really rough. And a lot of times if I know it's going to be symmetrical, I only draw like half of it. I'll draw the right-hand side, knowing that I'm going to just go on the computer and copy and paste and flip, and then, balance everything out there. From there, either I go straight into an embroidery program, where I lay out the embroidery designs, which is still vector drawing like Illustrator is, or I'll go into Illustrator or CorelDRAW and lay out a full vector graphic. And lately I've kind of pushed myself in that direction to kind of work out all of the vectors first. But doing vectors for embroidery design is different than doing vectors for graphic design, because you're not just layering like flat art anymore. You have to think about how stuff stacks on top and what direction it's going in and how it's going to start and stop. So there's a lot of like, I'm thinking embroidery while I'm doing graphic design.
Okay.
And then if I do it that way, it speeds up the process a little bit, because the drawing tools in Illustrator are far more advanced than the drawing tools that you'll have available inside of an embroidery design program.
Yeah. Now, and gaining a little bit more into the nuances. So when you're, of course, looking at the embroidery program, you're actually having to think of the layers of how the stitching is actually going to be layered going onto the fabric itself. Is that what you mean?
I like to say it's like 2.5D. Like, it's not really 3D design, but you do have to think about dimension and depth. And the really challenging thing, and one of the things I really enjoy about working with thread, is that it creates a lot of depth just by the way light hits the thread. So it's you're drawing, but it's three-dimensional. The yarns of themselves have depth to them, and they bounce light in different ways. So you can create a lot of emboss kind of effects that you'd see in Photoshop. That's natural in stitching. So you'll see highlights, where the light source is coming from on that edge, and then shadows on the opposite edge and things like that. So a lot of times you have to kind of like play with it or fight against it. I've tried to do really flat graphics and been very unhappy with the outcome, because you see the stitches and that creates a layer of noise. So you have to kind of punch up contrast a little bit more than you'd think. And the way two different colors play against each other, like they're two clear colors, but when you stitch them next to each other, the way they stitch, they might blend, like they might just visually, you just can't see it through the noise of the stitches. So a lot of times I'll create a design, and then I have to go back through the design and start removing colors from it, because those two shades of gray look exactly the same in the embroidery, even though they're clearly different grays. Yeah, just based on how the layers, the light bounces off the threads.
So when you're actually doing these designs, are you oftentimes printing? Well, printing is not the right word, but embroidering the actual design several times before you end up with the final product, or is the program okay? How many iterations do you typically have per design?
Every once in a while, I'll get lucky and get by with like one or like two, because there's a handful of different things you have to pay attention to. Color is obviously the most challenging, just because what looks right on a computer screen doesn't look right in thread. So like you immediately go to the thread and you're like, and it just depends on how many colors are in the design. But so some of them will be like dozen embroideries just trying to find the right combination of blues. Also tension, how the thread kind of pulls together. So what you think is a 1 point line, after it's stitched, the threads have tightened a little bit, and now it's a 0.5 line. So it's like you're gonna have to adjust for that, and how it stitches on. Like if a line of stitching on top of other stitching won't shrink as much as a line of stitching that's just floating in space. So there's that pull compensation that kind of have to go through, and some of those I can anticipate, just from past experience of, this looks a lot like this other design I did, and I knew how much I had to pull and adjust this. So typically, if it's it's typically like 4 or 5, if it doesn't involve a lot of colors. If I'm, maxing out a lot of colors, then there's a lot of just stitching part of the design and looking at it and trying to figure out which colors do I like better.
That's not too bad. I mean, when you think about the process that you oftentimes, as a graphic designer, have to go through and do things. So you're looking at a very similar process, but the way that you're going about it and the things that you have to think about, instead of thinking about how ink is layering, you're thinking about the layers of course, that fabric and thread.
So instead of bleed, I'm dealing with pull compensation, the tension. Then the one thing, and the other benefit is, I can quickly iterate because one of my embroidery machines is sitting right next to my computer system, which makes it noisy to be at my computer, but I can quickly see what's going on and I can just run a section of it, or I can run the entire design and then just sit down with the design and go back to my computer and just start tweaking, all of the things I see in this one design, which I was doing earlier today. I was working on a design for a private order, and it was just a lot of little, I got it where I needed it, but I knew I needed another couple passes at it just to get the little adjustments made and, try a couple different shades of blue to see which blue looks better. So it's one of those, it's the classic thing where you have to be just a little bit more patient and go, let's try one more and see if I can improve it any. But I was today I had to take a photograph of it on my phone just so I could zoom in, because I couldn't quite tell just looking at it how small it was. I couldn't tell. Am I seeing one of these two grays? Is one overlapping more than it should be, or is it just a trick of the light?
Wow.
So,
okay.
Yeah. So it really depends on the design. How fiddly you have to get with it. This just happens that this design for this private order is extremely tiny little detail that I'm working on.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Well, good. Well, I mean, if we can start actually going through and
Sure.
showcasing some of these. So first, I'd like to see if you have an early version of what your Fezes look like, and then we can, of course, show some of these ones that are more recent, and we can go over, of course, the details and how you do, limited runs of the Fezes and so on and so forth. How does that sound?
Yeah. Oh, absolutely.
Okay.
So I was lucky enough to get contacted by one of my very first customers, who unfortunately was dealing with medical problems and needed to unload some of his stuff. And I said I would gladly buy back the Fez that you bought from me for what you paid for it, just so I get my hands back on it. This is one of the first Fezes that I made. This is one of the Fezes that I made for that first year. After people said, "Are you selling the hats?" And I said, "No, look at the artwork." The next year at that show, this is one of the guys that I brought with me.
Okay.
And I've totally changed the way I manufacture them. You can see this guy's kind of collapsed under his own weight over the years. Mm-hmm. So this would have been 2005. I think 2004, 2005 when this one went out. I think this might have been 2004. So this is a pre Fez-O-Rama. So this is before I even decided to create a business around it.
Okay, so this was shortly after really the art shows that you had been.
Yeah, so this was the second art show. So the first art show was the year that I was showing art and embroidered shirts and glasses and things like that, and people kept asking about the hats. This was my return the next year, saying, "Okay, here's some hats." So it was a tiki event. It's called Tiki Oasis. It's still going on now. Every summer, and that's a shrunken head. And this guy, this was a later one, so I think this was the next year for that same event.
And here you just have Fez on it for, of course, our podcast.
This one I did a handful of ones that just had gold letters that just said Fez.
Yes.
On it. So yeah, these are two of the early ones. So I won't say 2004.
Now I also noticed on the one that just says Fez on it with the artistic embroidery, it doesn't have a tassel. So
it has there is a little eyelet hole in the top.
Oh,
so gotcha. I don't know what happened to the tassel that was originally in this one.
Okay. But that's normally how a Fez is that you have the hat portion and, of course, the tassel, or
so traditionally there'll be a tassel. The classic ones, the tassel's glued in, so it's not something you can change, but that was one of the things that I wanted to do from the beginning, because I always noticed when I would see a vintage Fez that the tassel would be messed up. So I always thought, well, it would just be easier to put a little buttonhole and we'll just change out the tassels after they get beat up and it'll be easy to change. And that's something I started with the ones I made my friends. Instead of trying to make them permanent, I said I'll put a hole in them, a little buttonhole, and we'll just knot the tassel inside. And that's something that I do that I don't think anybody else does. I've never seen anyone else do the replaceable tassels.
Yeah, I haven't seen that myself either. So that's cool that you had that foresight to when you were going to be making these that you said, we'll be able to make it so it can be replaced. And I'm sure that you could also even change up the colors too, depending upon if you wanted to do something like that to match some other part of your wardrobe.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, so it started out. I made the first batch for my friends, honestly, and the whole thing was I needed to figure out how I could make fezzes for my friends that they wouldn't destroy. And I knew, like I could have blocked them out of felt like the traditional ones, the hardened felt, but somebody's going to sit on it. Somebody's going to crush it underneath their case of CDs in their backseat of their car or something. So while I was going through design school, I kind of worked out like this would be a good way to do them, kind of self-sculpture, so that you could fold them if you needed to, and it wouldn't be instantly ruined. And they could be washed, unlike felt. So, it's something that could survive just normal use.
Yeah.
And part of that was you'd have to take the tassel out. If you're going to wash the fez, you got to take the tassel out. So making them replaceable and also just giving them the freedom to pick their favorite color of tassel and just go with that.
That's really cool. So I didn't know that you could actually wash those, and that's actually one of the things I wanted to ask you a little bit later on about the care of the fezzes that you make. They are machine washable, or do you recommend only hand washing?
I recommend hand washing. I mean, they are machine washable in the sense that I have shoved them in the washing machine, gave them, worst case scenario. So we took some fezzes and stuck them in with jeans, put them on hot, like just beat them up. And the issue becomes they wear out faster. So, like any piece of clothing, it's eventually going to wear out. So if you're throwing it through the washing machine over and over and over again, they will start to show wear and tear. The dryers are bad. So I recommend if you are going to put it in the washing machine, put it in the washing machine on delicate. Don't throw it in with your jeans. And air dry it. Just set it up on something that it's not crushing under its own weight like this old one. So you can see this one's been around for a little while, so it's kind of crushed. And just the weight of the fez itself is kind of folded itself in on it. So what I do is I would just put it on top of like a can of beans or something, so that the top is supporting its weight and the bottom edge isn't on the ground or isn't on the shelf, and just let it air dry. So I recommend hand washing just because you kind of will only hand wash it as much as it needs to, whereas in the washing machine, it's just going to go through the entire cycle, even if it's clean. So air drying is really the key there, because the heat from the dryer and the tumbling will wear out the fabric fastest.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Pretty much applicable to all clothing.
Yeah. Well, and one of the things that I had noticed very early on when I had taken a look at your website was that the fabric that you all use is not just felt from, all apparent, and we'll actually show one of the fezzes that is very obvious that it's not felt. But in comparing it to one that my grandfather had, and I, of course, inherited when he passed away, you had mentioned that when you were going through your design process, when you were thinking about this back in college, that you didn't want to have the felt that was pressed into the form, like the fez that my grandfather had from being a Shriner has a special case. It has where you put it in, and there's a form factor that comes up to support the inner portion of the fez, so it doesn't again collapse on itself. But I noticed obviously that the fez material and the way that the hat was formed was very rigid, and the ones that you have seem to be, they hold their form, but not as you don't have to worry about, like you said, sitting on it and ruining it completely. So that's really nice that you can have something that you can almost wear not only on special occasions, but also almost day to day, like you and many of the people that you have at your company do.
Yeah, so that was kind of designed into it. I have done blocked hats, which is the stiffened felt hats. I've made top hats. I've made all sorts of different stuff. The real challenge with doing a blocked hat is you need the block. So those fezzes were made around a wooden form that stretched the felt into the shape of the fez. And you need a block for every shape, every size that you're making. You need a specific block. And for me, I don't believe in the one size fits all model for hats. So, 3 blocks wouldn't be enough. I would need like 7 or a dozen different blocks to just get through a full size range to get the right shapes. So there's the natural limitation of that. And on top of that, there's chemicals involved in blocking hats. And I had done that back in college when I was studying costume design, but I kind of knew it's not something I have the facility for here. And I had been studying costume and fashion and sewing. And so I liked the idea of being able to do something that was just cut and sew. I didn't need to have specialized equipment to get the shapes, and I could focus on the design. So instead of having to engineer new blocks every time, I can just engineer new patterns, and then I can focus on the embroidery aspect of it. Also, while you can embroider onto felt, the more embroidery you do on the felt, the weaker the felt's going to get. So the heavyweight velvets that I use can take a bit more of a beating because they have a canvas back to the fabric. It's a little bit more durable as far as it's a little bit odd for embroidery. It's not the kind of thing that most people would embroider on, but I can get really high density in the embroidery. So I can get really dense stitches, more than you would get in like a t-shirt. Because
of the nature of the canvas that you're working on.
Yeah. So the substructure of the fabric is a loose enough weave that you're not cramped, you're not crowding as much, but it's fairly heavy, so it's a little bit more stable than like a dress shirt would be. So a lot of times you'll see on embroidery, the hard thing is where the stitches are. You'll see wrinkling in the fabric because you're adding mass by adding stitches, and then those stitches are also pulling. So you're going to get a lot of like puckering and pull. So that's kind of the challenge with embroidery design, is trying to balance that and keep it from crushing the structure of the fabric. But at the same time, you don't want so much fabric underneath it that the embroidery has nowhere to go.
Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, now that you've given us and our listeners more context on how that all works, so that's fascinating, Jason. Thank you so much. So let's actually go into some of these pieces that you have here. I'm going to share my screen and let me know if you see it here.
Yep. Yeah, there we go.
Okay, so the one that, of course, that we have on screen right now is one
go
that
to the. There's another view. This is the back view of that design.
Okay.
So if you back up one, I think
this one.
Yeah, that one. So this is our newest design, and that's actually, I'm working on a batch of those right now. Today I was cutting the fabric for it. This is our crossed keys design, and this is on a tweed, a wool. Herringbone tweed that I've been messing around with a little bit. It requires a lot of extra steps over what the velvet that we typically use, but I really like the kind of stuffy English look that it creates. And that other view was the back. So the front has a pair of crossed keys, and the back has the little keyhole.
Yes.
On it. And one of my things I love to kind of focus on is the symbology. The idea that there are concepts in design that repeat throughout the ages, and nobody can really claim ownership to them, but a lot of people do. So you'll see crossed keys in a lot of stuff, and they don't even really know who started it. The Vatican uses crossed keys. The Masons have a symbol for crossed keys. So it's this idea of unlocking forbidden knowledge or unlocking secret knowledge. The most recent, like, real pop culture reference to crossed keys was I'm blanking on the movie.
Was it one recently, or?
Yeah, it was like a year or two ago, and I can't believe I'm blanking on it.
Can you think of anyone who was
Grand
in it?
Budapest Hotel?
Oh yes, yeah,
which I love. That was like one of my favorite movies of the year. And the concierges had the Society of the Crossed Keys, which again was it was the collective society of all of these concierges, and it was just a sort of a secret organization where they could facilitate things. So it was just seeing things like that kind of like pop up throughout the ages and many different references. I like to kind of play with those. So I knew when I saw that movie, I'm like, okay, I'm going to have to do my take on crossed keys. And a lot of times the design idea will just sort of sit in my mind for a long period. Just because I have to also focus on like, what shows am I doing? When can I debut it? When do I have time for it? if it's going to use special material like this, I have to source a special material, and how much can I get my hands on, and things like that. So this one just came out recently, and we were doing Dapper Day at Disneyland, which is this this expo that they put on. And Dapper Day at Disneyland is a day for people to go dressed up to Disneyland. And it's an outside party that organizes it. It's not an official Disney event, but a lot of retro people will dress up. And the idea is to kind of like look like the people in the architectural drawings of Disneyland. Back in the day looked, so they're all wearing suits and hats and things like that. So when I was working on this design, I kind of wanted to play with the idea of the grotesqueries that they had for the Haunted Mansion. So this idea that you'll see faces and things. So I kind of alluded to skulls and all of it. So the keys on the front kind of look like skulls. The keyhole in the back, vaguely looks like a skull. So kind of playing with that Haunted Mansion kind of vibe to it.
Yeah, no, I actually saw that when I of course had seen these on your website before. So that's really cool that that's exactly what you were intending.
And you can see in this design where I'm using a lot of shades of gray in an attempt to kind of create a dimensional look to it.
Yeah.
So playing with the highlights and shadows to try to create more of a 3D look to the stitches.
Yes. And I have to say the camera that you use for your material and for highlighting your items is awesome. If you don't mind me asking, do you use a Canon or a Nikon?
This is a Sony NX5.
Okay.
So Micro Four Thirds I've had for like numerous years.
Yeah.
And just the zoom lens that came with it in the package that I got. And then a little, and then Photoshop where I'll remove the background. I have like a little stand that I'll put the fezzes on and take a photograph in front of just a white cloth.
Okay.
And then I remove the backgrounds for my website. So for these JPEGs, I just have a solid color. And I put in a drop shadow.
Yep.
Just to give it a little bit more of a physical look to it.
Yeah, it would look very flat if you didn't.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's one of those things where there's a lot of design legacy in my website where it's like, that's just the way I've always done it. So I'm just going to keep doing it that way. So I always kind of look at it going, I need to come up with a new idea for the way I photograph my fezzes and then end up going, but this is working for me. So I'm just going to, I don't have time to mess with that right now.
Yeah. Well, and if it's working, why fix it right now?
Yeah.
Now, I'm going to jump back. I'm going to end my screen share really quickly because the one that we have right now on screen for our podcast listeners is a felt hat with a black tassel. And the felt has this wavy pattern to it. What's the actual term for that within the industry? Is it?
Well, that's a embossed velvet.
Embossed velvet, okay.
And it's a flocked velvet that I use because I need the stiffness. So it's not like your plush rayon velvet, like a garment velvet. This is more like an upholstery velvet. Okay. Because you need I want the stiffness so it gives that classic hat look. So it's not flouncy.
Yes.
And then what they do is they make the velvet and then they run them through these heated rollers that emboss the texture onto them. And the reason I like the embossed the velvet for this is it kind of stands up to wear a little bit better. So it doesn't crush as easily and it doesn't show wrinkles as easily. So it's like you can get away with folding these up and then just sticking them on your head and it doesn't really show up as much.
Okay. So again, the embossed velvet is what gives, or the process of making the velvet when they put it through the rollers is what gives it this wavy look to it.
Right. And what it's doing is it's pushing fibers, to the right and to the left. So that gives you, it's all one color, but it's the way the light bounces off it that gives you those highlights and shadows all the way around it instead of just being one section.
Yeah, it's similar to when, like, if you sit on a velvet sofa or something like that, and you rub your hand across it, the fibers will go one way, and the ones that haven't been swept down by your hand will show a different way. So you have the different shades between the where you had pressed down and where they are still standing up, in essence.
Yeah.
Okay. So
and it just gives you, it's one of those things where it's like I like that you don't have to worry about handprints on it that you've brushed velvet one way or the other.
Yeah. Well, perfect. So what I was going to go to on this is the fact that you have a octopus, I think it's an octopus, not a squid, and then you're actually wearing.
Yes, I'm actually wearing this model.
Okay, so I was wondering if it was one that was slightly different, because on the webcam it looks like you're actually wearing one that is like blue, but this one that was on the screen was gray. But they're both gray.
Yeah, it's probably just the webcam adjusting for the red.
Yeah. So tell us a little bit about your fascination with octopus, because or octopi, excuse me. I've noticed that this is not the first time you've done designs like this.
There's a handful of running gags in my design work, and cephalopods are definitely one of them. I'm just fascinated by them, both from the naturalistic, the animals themselves, but also in how they've been represented through the eras. So you get the Kraken idea, which is what I refer to this one. Which is not anatomically accurate or in a sense, but it's that, that big, Jules Verne monster thing. So I've always liked mythology, and I love nature. So the cephalopod is one of those creatures that or that group of creatures that blends or crosses over both of those.
Yeah.
So I'm sure the first people who described a cephalopod to the general public were thought to be insane. So it's one of those things where I love playing with those ideas. Just like another constant theme that pops up over and over again for me is skulls. And again, it's one of those things where it's like, like the skull and crossbones is poison, but it's also piracy, and it's one of those things that just sort of like pops up throughout the eras. And then monkeys and hats just seems appropriate because there's that running theme with monkeys and fezzes.
Yep, and the other one that I had noticed that you like is the goat too. So
the goat is relatively new for me. So I've always been kind of fascinated by the different eyes. So like cat eyes and goat eyes and octopus's eyes and squid eyes. Just the how unique they're all doing basically the same concept as our eyes, but how unique they are. And goat eyes were one of those ones where it just really kind of throws you when you're staring at the strange shapes of the goat. And this past year, we'll do Christmas themed designs where I've done like a handful of different Krampus designs over the years. I've been doing that for like 6-7 years. And I've done Santa Claus a couple of times. And then I kind of got into the Yule goat, which is a Swedish tradition. And it was just sort of like this weird idea. So I did a Yule goat, and which allowed me to play with the weird eyes. And when I did that Yule goat this past holiday, I thought, what, I really need to do a like non-holiday, just a goat design that would utilize his weirdly creepy, happy face that I designed.
Did you, if I can interrupt, did you by any chance see the movie The Witch yet?
Yes, and I loved it.
Yes, and
being a theater major and knowing a lot of the history of that subject.
Yep.
And seeing all of the many little references. So yeah, with the whole thing with Black Phillip, which is a character from the movie and is a goat and is very creepy just by being a goat. He wasn't doing anything special. He was just creepy as a goat is. So yeah, I had already done the Yule goat, and I was thinking I really need to do, I want to figure out, could I just do a goat? Because I really like the goat's face, and I kind of wanted to take the Christmas aspect out of it. And then I saw the movie and saw Black Phillip, and it was immediately like, okay, it's a black fez. It's a it's a dark colored goat, and he's going to have this style of horns. Like, I have to do this.
Yeah.
So a lot of times, again, it's that idea that we all share these same concepts, that throughout history we all kind of keep coming back to these same images and these same ideas. And that kind of fascinates me, that one called like multiple cultures, multiple histories kind of merge on graphics. And just like the goat is, classic heavy metal design or Satanism or witchcraft or horror, or it's just a happy goat. Like, there is nothing about that fez beyond the fact that I did use glow in the dark thread for his eyes and his teeth. That is inherently creepy. He's a very happy goat. It's just goats just somehow tend to be creepy. And my belief is it's because their eyeballs. The irises on their eyes are not what we're used to seeing, so we kind of freak out. And the same thing goes for the octopus. The octopus has a very strange iris, and I think that has a lot of impact on how we perceive, the mood or the emotion of it. So, for ages, octopuses were considered devil, evil, and again, it's just because they have a weird iris.
Yeah, they came from the depths of the ocean where it's all dark and everything. And then I think also, like, when you think about like sharks, you can't, there is no pupil. You look into their eye and it's
Right.
a sea of blackness. And same thing with many forms of snakes. Like I have a ball python and you look at her eyes and they're completely black. You cannot see. And it looks like you're looking at some, inanimate object, but
and that's the thing that I think a lot of people respond to is they want to see something. They want to, psychologically, they're waiting to get some kind of feedback from the eyes, and you can't because you can't see the iris in a snake's eyes. So because of the absence of something to inform them, they freak out or or not. It just depends on how you respond to that stuff.
Well, Jason, I know that we're coming up on the top of the hour, and I know I'm catching you, of course, in the middle of your day. So I want to be respectful for you of your time. Do you want to go through some of these other designs that you have? Is there anything that you want to specifically share? Background on.
Well, yeah, we can pop through some of the designs that I can give you, some context for where the design comes from, at least.
Okay, perfect. Let me go ahead and jump back over. And for, again, our podcast listeners, I'm, again, sharing my screen. So the first one here is, of course, one that has purple velvet, and then it looks like a teacup with 2 cross spoons.
Yeah, so again, this is playing with the skull and crossbones concept.
Mm-hmm.
So the teacup is vaguely reminiscent, very vaguely. I'm a big tea drinker. So it's and I've made comments before about how much I love tea, and people keep asking me, "Are you ever going to do a tea themed Fez?" And I would struggle with the idea, like, well, I don't want to just do like a typical like tea bag with a little tea, like a little tab hanging out of a cup or something. So it took me a while to kind of wrap my mind around it. There's also I know at Dragon Con they do this. I'm sure they do it elsewhere. It's called a tea duel, where they dip biscuits into the tea and then they try to hold it for as long as possible, and whoever's biscuit falls apart first before they get it in their mouth is eliminated. And they also play with the idea of a teacup and spoons. So it's again seeing these ideas that kind of float around and translate through different people. And I had a request to do something like that on a Fez, and that's where this design came from. And for me on this one, it was really trying to focus on the 3D aspect of it. So I was referencing actual teacups and referencing actual spoons, trying to get a relatively like a photorealistic look to it.
Mm-hmm. And I think it works, quite well, because not only do you have the way that the light is hitting the tea that is, of course, in the cup, you have that reference of course, the liquid being different translucency, and then also the reflection within the teaspoons that are crossed. The reflection within the bowl of the spoon is actually different for the spoon that's on the left and the one that's on the right. The one that's on the right is reflecting more of the body and of the handle of the teacup, versus the one that's on the left is just focusing on the actual cup itself. So I think you did a great job, if I can be so critical myself. All right, let's go ahead. So you had mentioned, again, your fascination with this monkey, and the one that we're looking at here. This is black, or is it green on in the background?
This is black. So this is a black velvet. This is what they refer to as the manic monkey. And it's just it's a monkey smiling, but in the way monkeys tend to smile, which is not how humans smile. So
Very
a lot
mischievous.
of teeth. And he's got a coffee bean on his Fez to indicate that he is thoroughly caffeinated.
I was wondering if that was a coffee bean. That is awesome. Okay. And then another one is...
so this is the year of the monkey, so I pulled out a few new monkey designs. This is the mandrill. And I had done a baboon or a mandrill years and years ago, but it was one of those early designs that I look back on and go, I could have done better with that. So I kind of revisited an old concept, but with a completely new design. So kind of a stylized cartoony look of a mandrill with the big red nose and the blue cheeks, and the whiskers and chin fuzz, and just sort of a bright, obnoxious mandrill look.
Yes. What's the significance of the fez with the blue star on it? Is there?
He's got an asterisk on his
Okay.
On his fez, which for the original one I did, I actually had a baboon butt on the back of the fez. On this one, I just wanted to kind of reference the idea of a butt. So he has a blue, the blue and red on his fez would kind of represent the skin on the baboon's butt.
I didn't
sort of a subtle that subtle internet reference.
Yes, I did not catch that. So you might have.
I try to hide a lot of little things like that in my designs, just so for people to kind of discover on their own.
Yeah, that's really cool. Very cool. All right, and this one is a tiki head.
Yeah, so that, like I said, that art show we got our start at was Tiki Oasis, which is a big tiki event and a lot of Polynesian themed artwork. And we still do a lot of a tiki event, at least 1 or 2 a year. So I always try to come out with new tiki designs. And this one I refer to as the mokole. Moko is the facial tattoo, New Zealand Maori word, and then he's got a lei around his neck. So this is, and again, it's just came out of just sketching random things in my sketchbook and kind of came up with this.
And it's a blue tiki head with purple lei.
And white, yeah, flowers. And this is the waka design. Waka's Maori for canoe, so it's referencing the carved canoes that the Maori used, and some tiki guys just sort of just kind of riffing on the idea of tiki sculpture and a lot of tiki themes. And again, it's one of those ideas that I like to play with something that's kind of a well-trod imagery. So you'll see this concept of rowers or canoe through a lot of the Polynesian artwork and a lot of the Polynesian pop artwork. So I just wanted to kind of do my take on it and kind of play with the sculptural aspect of the canoes in the stitching.
Yeah, and I noticed also that the how tall the fez is on this one, unless it's just a.
This is a different style. So
Gotcha.
We have 3 styles that we make. We have our traditional tall fez, which the previous mokole was.
This one right here. Okay.
And that's about 5 inches, 5.5 inches tall. And then we have our low profile one, which was the manic monkey and the crossed keys was a low profile, and that's about 4.5 inches tall. And there's the manic monkey, the teacup and spoons was a low profile. And then this waka design is what I refer to as a chapeau, which is just French for hat, because I just like to mess around with language. But it's based off of a Scottish Glengarry. So it's like a Scottish military cap.
Okay.
And this one's a lot shorter. This one comes in at about 3 inches tall, depending on what size you're getting, and fits very tight to the skull. So it's more of a cap.
Perfect. And this one,
I get a lot of requests for zombies.
I like this one a lot.
Oh, thanks. So I have a friend who works. He does a lot of podcasts, and he does a lot of horror themed stuff. And he's directed his own films, and he requested a zombie theme. And I've done a few zombie themes over the years, but I wanted something really intense because he's horror zombie. And I've done a lot of kind of silly zombie stuff in the past. So I did a special design for him. And then this is sort of the production model of it. And like the goat, the zombie's eyes and teeth glow in the dark. Yeah.
Very cool. It's nice that you can see one that, again, has that glow in the dark aside from the goat that you had mentioned earlier. Yeah. And this one also was one of the ones I had seen when I was going through these pictures really quickly. This one is it a Japanese beetle is what you're referencing? Or
well, this is actually a flying scarab.
Flying scarab, okay.
More of an Egyptian scarab, but instead of doing the traditional Egyptian artwork, the Art Deco kind of feathered scarab look that the Egyptologists discovered, I kind of wanted. I have a friend. She had some beetles on display on her wall, and I was fascinated by how their wing structures work for a beetle.
Mm-hmm.
And I always thought that was really kind of cool how, I wanted to kind of play with the wings and reference the actual anatomy of the wings. But at the same time, there's a lot of beetles, just actual beetles as art, and decorated beetles and things like that. So I was kind of playing with that tradition of beetles as a form of jewelry, as well as really referencing the anatomy of a beetle and trying to kind of bring it back into reality from what the Egyptians did with the feathered flying scarab. And we did this on Chapeau as well as low profile Fez.
Okay. Yeah, this one I thought was extremely beautiful in the way that you were able to represent the translucency of almost like the wing and getting that fabric that you had mentioned earlier coming through, where you can see a little bit of the black, but you have enough of course, I guess it's almost like a silver thread or white thread that gives you
so there's like 2 or 3 different shades of thread. In the wings, and then I also messed around with density to try to create the look of transparency.
Yeah, it works. It works really well.
Yeah, so and a lot of times my designs, there'll be a very specific challenge that I'm like facing, and in this one was definitely like the wings. I wanted to try to represent the beetle wings, and that informed a lot of the rest of the design for me.
Very nice. Well, we're at the top of the hour and actually a little bit over. So do you have some more time, or do you want to?
Yeah, I can keep going.
Okay. All right. Perfect. All right. Let me go ahead and go to this next one here and zoom back out. And this is the Phoenix.
This is our Phoenix design, and we do Phoenix Comicon every year. So that's coming up in like 10 days.
Yes.
And every year I would go, I really should do a special Phoenix design for Phoenix Comicon in Phoenix, Arizona. And it was one of those things where the idea was there, but the concept hadn't materialized. And eventually I sketched something up in my sketchbook, and almost every step of the process on this one, I was convinced it was not going to work.
Why?
It doesn't have because it's emulating so much fire and so much light and very little shadow. I was convinced that I just didn't really it's so different from everything else I've done. This was much more sculptural than graphic in a sense. Because when you're sketching in a sketchbook, you're of course I'm just doing black line on white paper.
Oh, true.
And then I'm like, how is that going to translate into nothing but yellows and oranges? So there was a lot of thread tests, a lot of color tests, a lot of, tweaking and changing shading and messing around. And I'm really happy how it came out. But it was a surprise to me. The whole process, I was just going through this thing in very little confidence that it was going to work in the end, and kept putting the time into it, but kept thinking, oh man, this is going nowhere. I'm not going to be able to pull this off. Yeah.
Well, you have, again, the gold, the different shades of gold, if that's a term that you can use. And then you have reds and purples, it's beautiful. And
thanks.
So is this one that you had done for Phoenix Comicon last year?
Yeah, so we did a limited run on a tall Fez for Phoenix Comicon last year. And then we got such a good response with it, I brought it back as a production design on low profile. Okay. So it was a limited edition in the tall version, and then the low profile we'll be bringing out to Phoenix next month.
Perfect.
And it's on the website now, and it's been in a number of shows over the past year.
Okay. All right. And that one you said is going to be the low profile one, and that will be coming back this year. And I will be sure to put a link in the show notes for that, for people to actually see, and if they want to purchase it, they can do so as well. And this one is a dragon.
Yeah, this is a Suro Fez. So this is one of the rare ones that I do in conjunction with somebody else. So we worked with this past year, Calliope Games was marking the 10th anniversary of the Suro board game, and they wanted to do a special Fez for it. And this is based off of the box art from the Suro game, which was a watercolor on the box art. So the challenge there for me was trying to take this watercolor and then translate it into a more dimensional thread design.
Yeah. Well, and I want to, for our podcast listeners, to help them understand like how detailed this is. Like you have the scales of the back of the dragon coming through in the way that you sewed this, and I think it is just so cool to see the way that you were able to layer it and give not only the bottom of the dragon the classic scales of like the bottom of a snake, but the scales on the back are totally different, and you can see that texture coming through, just even this picture. And I'm sure actually looking at it in person is even all that more awesome.
Yeah, this was a chance to really kind of focus on the tradition or the history of embroidery. So you'll see a lot of like Chinese brocades and embroidered designs that have these amazing dragons and amazing textures in them. So this was a chance for me to really kind of like play my hand at more traditional techniques that you'll see in hand embroidered work, but with a machine. And it's inspired by the traditional Chinese dragon as well. So it's kind of trying to respect the history as well as the source art, the watercolor design that was done for the box art of Suro. But again, it's the trying to see where where my design skills fit into the equation.
Yes. Well, it's beautiful. It's a very nice piece. And how many? We didn't even talk about like the limited runs. Like with the Phoenix Comicon high profile. How many runs did you actually do?
The Phoenix, I believe that was 25 Fezes.
Wow. Okay. All right. And
yeah.
You actually number them so that people that went to Phoenix Comicon will actually know what number within that run they got, or I'm trying
to remember if that was a numbered edition or not. I think it was.
Okay. So sometimes you do number editions and sometimes you just do it.
Yeah. Something. Well, yeah. So a lot of times I'll do numbered editions. Sometimes they're just limited where, they're not, there's not. And then in the numbered editions, what I will traditionally do is I'll have a pin that goes to the Fez that's numbered. Because I found very early that if I number the Fezes themselves, a lot of collectors, are like, I'm trying to get number 5. I always get number 5. And the challenge with my Fezes is if I number them in advance, I don't know what size number 5 is going to be. So because there was a while where I would stitch the numbers into the lining, and then people would be disappointed to find out that number 5 is a medium and they weren't extra large. So then I switched to a pin system where I would have pins. So they would get the Fez in their size and then the numbered pin that goes to it, separate from it. And then the challenge with that would be that people would walk off without their pins. And then I'd be like, am I missing a Fez? Did I gain a pin? So it's one of those, it always breaks down at the the management level of trying to figure out how we, maintain the numbers. So I have like numbered editions from the past where I'll have like a pin laying around and I'm like, I don't know whose pin, whose Fez this is supposed to have gone to and how they didn't get it. But
yeah, and that's again a management thing where if you are only doing them at Comic-Cons, then if it wasn't so flippant, such a madhouse around, I'm sure your booth, then you could like get each person's name, but it's a madhouse oftentimes at these events. So
yeah, and then unfortunately, it's hard to get a hold of anybody afterwards.
Yeah, and another Kraken.
Yeah, so this is my little squid guy. Again, it's another one that I kind of played with my love of cephalopods and also tiki design. So it has some that Maori tribal tattoo kind of look to it.
Yeah. And this one is more of a green blue with a blue or an aqua tassel versus the one, of course, that you are wearing on your head is again gray. So this one is also a little bit more playful in its coloring and low profile again.
Yeah, this is the chapeau style, so this is the small one.
Chapeau style, yes.
Yeah.
And then the classic eye. Yeah,
so this is our the classic third eye, the mystic eye concept. All-seeing eye, yeah. So again, it's another one of those things, the Illuminati eye. It kind of shows up over and over throughout our history. and is translated differently by different people. So this was the style I was going for. Is I actually wanted to get a little bit photorealistic with it.
Mm-hmm.
So I wanted to work in colors that actually tie into the fabric itself, almost as though it is part of the fabric, so that it's not an embroidery on the fabric, but there is an eye peering from the velvet.
Yeah, where the velvet is opening up with the eyelid and everything.
Yeah, so it's the blue velvet with blue stitching on it, in a velvet eye or a violet eye.
Violet eye, yes. Are the three marks? Oh, sorry, 6 marks on either side. Well, it's 3 marks. I should have clarified. 3 marks on either side of the eye. Do they have any significance and symbolism?
That's actually a really good question. No, none intended, other than the fact that for me it seems appropriate. So it's entirely possible that there is a very specific reference that I've seen over and over again, and I didn't know why. Because it just there's a tall Fez version as well, which I did originally, and a lot of times I'll get requests if I do a Fez. I'll get requests for there to be a matching chapeau. A lot of people, prefer one style over another, so we'll do variations on it. So on the Fez design, which came first, I put the 3 lines above just to kind of signify power or surprise. And then with the chapeau, I don't have much vertical space. It's much more of a horizontal space I get to work in. So I moved them over to the sides, and again, to give that kind of that look of power or surprise.
Yes. Oh, it's another.
But the mystic number of 3 is, that is a recurring theme.
And this is what you were referencing with the marks above the eye, and again on a large form version of the Fez, where the eye is in the bottom third of the piece.
Yeah, and on the Fez style, this one really feeds into the third eye aspect, because the eye lands pretty much at the top of your forehead when you're wearing the Fez.
Yeah, I think from the design standpoint, this one, you have maybe it's just the way that the flash hit the eye, but you see a little bit more of the shadow of the eyelid on the eyeball versus.
Yeah, that really depends on the angle. So since this one's tilted towards the light source, it kind of gets eaten up.
Gotcha.
It's there, but it's really subtle in that photograph.
But that's so cool that you can see the changing depending upon lighting. So that again speaks to your creativity in design. So very cool.
Thanks.
And then I think we're almost to the top of what you had sent over. This one is a skull on a black background with a red tassel.
And this is a Calavera design. So it's that traditional sugar skull that you'll see at Dia de los Muertos.
Yes.
So again, skulls is a recurring thing for me, and the Calavera designs out of Mexico are one of the great uses of the iconography of skulls. So this is the second Calavera design that I've done, this decorated skull style, and really playing with small detail. And I wanted to get a lot of bright colors into it, more the celebration style instead of the creepy.
Yep, and it has blue and red and a little bit of macabre with the spider webs also. So perfect. And this is a close up.
This is so the first one was the chapeau style. This is the Fez style.
Okay.
So the chapeau one, much smaller, and it has some filigree work on the outside of it.
Oh,
okay. The Fez one is just the skull, larger, so I can work the details a little bit better.
And it looks like there's buttons on this one as well at the very top.
Yeah, so this one you can see the vents. Those are mesh vents that I can add to the top, and to help with airflow. So if you're in a warm climate, or if your head sweats a lot, or if you're under lights, the vents can make a huge difference.
Okay, is that something by request that when somebody orders them that they can?
Yeah, so those are put in. Those are added, to the order. So you can go in on any of the order pages, and there'll be an option to add vents to your Fez.
Okay.
And it's one of those things where, obviously they can't be removed because, we're punching holes through them. But they can always be added. And, so like out in Arizona, when we go to Phoenix, I'll be doing a lot of vents there, because once you've discovered vents in the desert, you realize they're kind of necessary.
It's kind of like air conditioning. I can't live without it.
Exactly.
This one I thought was a kind of unique. I'm not sure. I'll be very honest with you. I'm not sure if it's like how I feel about it. It's because you have this leopard print, and then you have the wine glass, or it's not wine glass. I apologize. The martini glass. So tell me a little bit about this one because I'm very perplexed by it.
Well, this is the Flying Martini. And there's a chapeau version and a Fez version, and they have leopard print tips. So the top of the hat is leopard print velvet. The sides are black, and that's where the martini glass is embroidered with, and the martini glass has wings. And this is really playing with that swank, mid-century, that smoking jacket, debauchery kind of vibe.
Gotcha. Okay.
And it's one of those things where a lot of people really enjoy our Fezes as drinking hats. So kind of a tip of the hat to the cocktail crowd.
Yes. Okay, that makes more sense. It's almost like a Playboy type.
Exactly.
Hat. Yes. Okay, that makes sense.
This is our muhe'e, which is the same as the squid, done in different colors, and the top has a bark cloth tapa print. So very Polynesian style to it.
And are you selling a lot of these also internationally, or are you mostly, again, getting these types of orders for the tiki type style?
Well, the one thing I have discovered is the tiki style is international. Anything I think is going to be regional isn't, or there's somebody off. So I've sent these to Japan. I've sent them to Australia. I've sent them all over Europe. But there's also tiki bars in Australia and Japan and all over Europe. So it's one of those things where I'm not so sure if it's just a tiki crowd, if they're fans of cephalopods, if they're people who actually recognize, the culture that the fabric comes from, it's like, and that's kind of the fun thing is I like the idea that people can bring their own interpretations to the designs.
Yes. And another tiki face.
Yeah. So this is our deep one. And we've done a lot of H.P. Lovecraft themed stuff. So I've done Cthulhu designs, and the deep ones were from one of H.P. Lovecraft's stories. And I kind of wanted to sort of cross the streams and bring in some H.P. Lovecraft and mix it in with the tiki. So it's sort of a tiki-fied version of the deep ones, which were the humanoids who've gone to live beneath the sea and have mutated into like fish people. So like sort of playing with that kind of thing.
And this is a nice bat with the veins coming through.
Yeah, so a lot like the scarab, this was almost a study. So it's an anatomical study. I wanted to do a bat, but I wanted to really focus on how the wings come together. So try to stay true to the animal as much as possible. And really focused on the veining in the wings and try to create. So it's a little cartoonish, but also a lot of the anatomy is represented.
Yeah, was this one done around Halloween, or did you just?
Yeah, I think I probably introduced this one in October a few years back.
Okay. And this one has a palm tree and two birds on it with arrows being grasped. Is this? Yeah, go ahead.
I was gonna say this one actually has a really fun story to it. We were doing that same tiki event, and I had come up with this concept for the tiki event. Each year is themed at the event, and the year that we did this, the theme was spies. So like James Bond style 1960s spies in Polynesian pop tiki stuff. And I did this design with one of my oldest friends, Troy Zimmerman, who is a designer. He works for Universal now. And I had pitched him this idea that it would be this sort of like Eastern Bloc culture, but on an island. So it's like I wanted the double-headed eagle, the Bavarian eagle, or that concept, but done in all tropical themes. So he had done a black ink drawing, and it's a double-headed bird of paradise holding war clubs, and there's a Fez design with the palm tree in front, and he had just done a black ink. And I looked at it and went, yes, this is exactly what I mean. And then that gave me the groundwork to really go to town on colors and try to punch up the tiki vibe. and make it more festive Polynesian, but still. So I was playing with that idea, like it's festive Polynesian, but oppressive, nationalistic flag kind of vibe.
Yeah, yeah. And then I like almost how the tiki tassel. I'm sorry, not tiki. The tassel of the fez comes up almost like in a whip like fashion too.
Yeah,
it brings that oppression through.
yeah. So Troy did it. He's an amazing designer. I love bouncing ideas off of him. So this was a lot of fun. This is a really personal one for me because it was a chance to kind of work with one of my best friends and take his, like I pitched him the concept. He did the ink drawing and then gave it back to me, and then I had to translate the ink drawing into embroidery design.
Yeah, well, and that brings us to the end of that that slide share. So I appreciate you going into all those details. I like to typically ask, artisans if there's anything that, obviously you have the Phoenix Comicon that's coming up. Is there anything that you want to throw out to your fans and to people, how they can, of course, get a hold of you, and then also anything that you all are working on that's kind of groundbreaking that they can, look to the upcoming Comic-Con and anything future, going through 2016?
Well, yeah, we have the next two shows we have Phoenix Comicon coming up. And I had that open a second ago. So we'll be there. We'll of course have our booth there, and a lot of these designs that you saw today in the slideshow we'll have in the booth. If you've seen us at the Phoenix Comicon before, we're bringing a bunch of new stuff this year, and I always try to change the designs out. So I would say like 85% of the designs we'll have were not in the booth last year. They're new since last year. So there's a lot of new stuff that's coming out, and I'll have a few other things that we didn't get to talk about today. I have basket cases that we use for carrying our fezzes. We have tassel pins. So we have these little pins that you can pin to the side of your fez, and that retain the tassel. And I have a couple new designs that we've added. Then we'll have those with us as well.
So let me pause, because we actually just had somebody talking about Disney pins, and I noticed how kind of that pin, and you said new design. So do you have a design for a pin that's going to be only for 2016, or how are you doing your designs?
So the design pins that I do them in batches of 100, and then I retire them. Okay. So, I mean, they're not individually numbered, but I order 100 of them, and then I just move on to a new design. So the two new ones that we just got in like a week and a half ago, 2 weeks ago, I have the mouse, and then I have my mimic octopus design, which was originally on a fez from many years ago, like 6 years ago, and then I've added to our pin collection. So there's only 100 of these made, and they disappear throughout the year. And as one design gets low, I order a new design. So the only pins that I restock are Fez-O-Rama pins, the little fez that says Fez-O-Rama, and all the other pins, all these other enamel pins that I do, those are limited to 100, and I just go to a new design. So I had a Cthulhu pin, that one's gone now. We have a Skull and Crossbones pin that I think I'm down to like the last 5 or 6 of them, and those are still on the website. And then I have a fez pin that has a D20 on a little fez, and I don't remember how many I'm at there. But so they're all limited editions in the nature that I only do 100 of them.
Yeah, that's awesome. So, I mean, again, if they get not only a fez from you, that might be, of course, a limited run, but you also, have these limited runs on the different pins. And if they, don't necessarily want to get a new fez coming there, they'll be able to pick up a pin perhaps, and, add that to their fez as well. Very nice.
Yeah. So, So if you're at Phoenix Comicon, come down to booth 684. I think it's 684/685. We have a 20, but you'll be able to find us. We'll have our sign up and lit this year, which it is new. There's a photograph in that slideshow or those photos down towards the bottom. I had a photograph of our booth, or one of the configurations of our booth. And one of the new things I did this year is I finally got all of the LEDs working in our sign. And this past weekend, my friend Will came out and debugged the code on them so that they're lighting up the right way. So that'll be the first year that it's lit up at Phoenix.
Very cool. And I think I have a picture here on the screen.
Yeah,
for
there you
everyone.
go. So you can see, obviously you can't see how it lights in a photograph because you can't see, but it'll subtly twinkle in the booth. And this was at Dapper Day. So this is a smaller booth than we will typically have, but only slightly smaller. And that's all scratch built cabinetry that the booth itself we built ourselves. And I made the sign the frame of the sign over the last 2 years. Finally got the LEDs in it this past February.
Wow. Okay. Yeah, I had seen the pictures that you had posted on, I think, your Facebook profile and then your Facebook page, and then also I think you had some on Instagram where you were going through, the creation of the Fez-O-Rama background there. So very nice. And congratulations for finally getting that working for these upcoming shows.
Thanks. Yeah, that was it was funny because that's one of those things I have a tendency to procrastinate based on my fear of not doing something correctly. So I had gotten the letters all physically built and then got to the point where it's like, okay, now I have to learn electronics. And there was a lot of like reading up on it and then figuring out what parts I needed and then not doing anything because I was afraid that they weren't the right parts. And this was a case where the procrastination pays off because every 6 months they come out with new electronics that can do whatever you wanted better. So I got got good boards for programming, and I already know how to do it better the next time because there's new stuff that's come out since I made that sign. Yeah, that would have made it easier or more dynamic. So it was one of those hurdles of just being afraid of trying. So finally got in there and learned how to solder on micro circuitry and boards and wiring and all that kind of stuff. And I had help, people help, that could help answer questions and kind of guide me through what parts I needed.
The power of the internet, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Well, perfect. And if people want to obviously connect with you and also order a Fez, what is the best way for them to find you on the interwebs?
Well, if you're looking for the Fezes, obviously you can go straight to Fez-O-Rama.com. And that's both with the dashes between the Fez-O-Rama or just straight across Fez-O-Rama. We have both URLs. And that's where you can see everything that I have in stock, as well as a lot of them will be made to order. So those are designs that I don't have in stock, but if you place the order, I will get to work on it within the week usually. The only thing that can delay it longer than a week is if I'm traveling for a show. Thankfully, I don't have any more shows that are back-to-back this year. That was our first 2 shows of the year were back-to-back. So I was kind of out of the Fez making studio for like half a month because we had to travel to Chicago and then back to LA for another show. So there's some special designs. I also constantly doing new designs and introducing what I refer to as Fez of the Week, where I'll do just for a week, there'll be a special design available. And it's not every week. It really depends on whether I'm preparing for a show or not. So that's where a lot of the variants will show up. So I've done a low profile of the Mystic Eye. That was a Fez of the Week. So you had to order it within that 1 week. The Yule Goat was a holiday special. So that's only available during the holidays. So you'll see a lot of new concepts will be introduced as special Fez of the Weeks, and they might return as a production design or special holiday ones. And there's occasions where I'll do a 1-day sale where a design is only available for a specific day. Just depending, like over the last couple of years, I've done special Black Friday designs. So for that Black Friday, you can order a special design that's not available the rest of the year.
Okay.
If on Twitter, it's Fezmonger. I go by Fezmonger a lot on the social networks, just because I like to separate what I'm doing from what the business is doing, even though they're both me. So there's a Fez-O-Rama Twitter account. That's me, Fezmonger. But you won't see pictures of my food on Fez-O-Rama, so you don't get any of the annoying, social posts. Those are on Fezmonger. We're on Facebook, Fez-O-Rama. We're on Google Plus, if anybody goes to Google Plus anymore. I get all those messages. They tend to come to me. So the business, the actual business, there's 3 of us main people in the business. Myself, my wife Maya, who takes care of a lot of the organizational management for the shows and helps me produce the Fezes, and then our partner Joe, who handles the background paperwork, the code stuff for the website, and a lot of the shipping. But he's got a real job as well, so he doesn't get to travel to all the shows. But he will be at Gen Con this summer. So those are the three main people. And then we have a few other friends who come in and work on a part-time, when it's crunch time, they'll come in and sew. So, but all the social stuff, you're talking to me.
Very cool. Well, I mean, it's awesome that that we can have you again on Collectors Hangout for not only the fact that it's been a dream of mine to have you on the show since I found you, back on, I think it was episode 2 or 3 of Collectors Hangout, and you're doing awesome work. Congratulations on, being 3 years full time in this business, and I'm glad that things are, going strong for you guys, and hopefully, this being out on YouTube and on Google Plus, on Facebook. And of course, our podcast listeners, that audience will be able to, again, send some business your way and help you again reach new milestones within your production and your business.
Well, thank you. And as just a small thank you, I want to offer any of the listeners, any of the fans of Collectors Hangouts, if you go to our website, not yet, I still have to, we'll be setting it up, but later this week, type in for your coupon code Collectors Hangout, no apostrophe or anything, one word, and we'll give you 10% off any Fez purchase there. And if you're going to be at Phoenix Comicon, I'll even bump that up. You come out and tell me that you watched the Collectors Hangout podcast, and there may be a quiz involved. I'll give you 13% off any of your purchases at the booth, which is rare because I've never done that kind of a thing at the booth.
That is awesome. Thank you so much, and we will definitely make sure to put that information also in the show notes. And thanks again for doing that for our listeners. I do have some really quick questions, or do I have another 2 minutes with you? Or
absolutely, yeah, no problem.
Awesome. So really quickly, we know that you like food. We also know that you, I think, are vegetarian or vegan.
Yes.
So, wanted to find out, as a vegetarian or vegan, if you were going to be going to Mars and you were going to be enjoying, 3 earthbound meals where you weren't going to be able to get your hands on good earth-grown vegetables, what would be your meals of choice, and what would be your favorite 3 beverages to enjoy with those meals?
Ooh, man, that's tricky because my palate changes a lot. Because I have like the foods that I like that are really healthy foods, like quinoa. I dig quinoa. But that's not really something that I'm going to waste one of my 3 special meals on. Lately I've really got back into vegan pizza. There's
okay.
It was one of those things where, because I'm totally lactose intolerant, so I had to like give up eating pizza because it would just totally mess me up.
Yeah.
And then recently like discovered some people who are doing vegan pizza right. There's a place in Silver Lake that does a vegan deep dish, and originally being from Chicago, that was something I thought I'd never see again, and it's amazing. And then there's a place down in Anaheim called Vegan Pizza that does this Indian style pizza, which is like this curry coconut sauce that is just amazing. So that's definitely one of my meals. Let's see, things that I would not be able to get. As far as vegetables are concerned, artichokes. That's one of those things that I don't eat a lot. Obviously, that's like a seasonal thing, but it comes around, and it's like it's one of those dishes that you forget you love. So it's like you have it, and you're like, oh, I've loved this since I was a little kid, but it never really occurs to me that it's really that important. And also Brussels sprouts. I saw Brussels sprouts growing in a garden as a kid, and they're so absurd looking that at that point, and I was like 5, I decided I love Brussels sprouts.
See, I was the total opposite. When I was 5, my parents made me eat Brussels sprouts, and to this day, I despise Brussels sprouts.
But that's the thing, is I didn't eat them before I saw them growing. So I saw them growing on this weird alien-looking plant in somebody's garden at like our friend's house. And I just remember seeing this as a little kid, and my mom's going, "No, you're not going to like those. You won't like those." And I decided then, like, no, I like Brussels sprouts, and still to this day, I still like Brussels sprouts. So it's just one of those bizarre things. As far as drinks are concerned, tea. I drink a lot of tea, and I love tea. Pu'er. I've really gotten into pu'ers lately, which is like an aged tea, a really like mellow, earthy kind of tea. And there's a bunch of different varieties, so you have to kind of like find the right one for your palate. Green teas. I drink a lot of tea. Also, I love blood orange juice. I cut it with like soda water because it's usually really dense, but it makes like this, what I refer to as a very pretentious orange soda. It's like a bitter orange.
I've never heard this.
So blood oranges, you can sometimes find the juice at like Whole Foods or Trader Joe's, something like that. It's kind of hard to find now, and it was being imported from Italy when I got it. But if you're familiar with Martinelli's, I was at Costco recently, and they had blood orange Martinelli's that pretty much nails what I was going for, which is this like, I don't like a lot of sugar, so I like the bitter, but I still like orange. So it's like an orange soda, but it's kind of a bitter orange soda, not a sweet orange soda.
I will have to check that out. I have never.
Yeah, if you can find the Martinelli's, I bought some because I'm like, okay, I have to give it a try. I don't know if it'll work, and it was actually quite good. So I really dug that.
Very cool. And what book has most influenced your life?
Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy was one of the really influential ones for me.
Yeah.
Anything by Douglas Adams. He wrote a brilliant book called Last Chance to See, and it was a special he did for BBC where he went around and did research and interviewed people who were trying to save the most endangered animals on the planet. And that is a fantastic book. But from just an overall, like, just predicting technology, humor, it's a Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, right from the radio plays all the way through to the video games, just a brilliant, and that is absolutely my favorite.
Yeah. What did you think of the movie that came out about five years ago?
I really dug it. A lot of people didn't like the changes, but if you're familiar with Douglas Adams' work and know the history of it, he changed every time he adapted his work. He completely changed it. So Hitchhiker's Guide is originally a radio show. They did a TV version and they did books. He wrote all of them, and none of them are the same. And he actually he passed away while they were working on the film. So a lot of the big changes in the script were ones that Douglas made, that he changed and created new characters and changed characters. So there's a lot of people who are kind of put off because it's not the Hitchhikers that they remember, but it's the creator had a hand in making a lot of those decisions. And I felt that the directors nailed the visual comedy of it. The sight gags and the timing was dead on for me. So I wish Disney had, instead of purchasing Star Wars and Marvel, supported some of the projects that they had created, like John Carter and Hitchhikers, and the Muppets. So it's one of those things where I can still really enjoy that movie. I would still love to see something truer to the original scripts, where you get Restaurant at the End of the Universe. Like you get more of the bigger story, the franchise aspect of it.
Yeah, I think if anything, I would agree with that. And I did not know about the fact that he had changed his stories when they were coming up with, of course, the radio play and, of course, the book and the different iterations, and that he was, of course, he had passed away during the movie. I did not know that. So that was some good history for me today. All right, so you're stuck on an island that has a tiki hut, and you only can listen to one song on your iPhone or Android. Are you iPhone or Android?
I am Android.
Android, okay.
Yeah.
What would that song be then? Only one song.
One song. Okay. Currently, I'm going to have to say I Like It, I Love It by Lyrics Born is my current song that just every time I hear it, it gets me pumped. That is my track. I'm a huge Bowie fan. I'm a massive Prince fan. And I'm kind of thrilled to have, like, late in the game, discovered another artist that would inspire me like that.
Yeah.
If you're not familiar with Lyrics Born, he He is a Japanese American rapper out of the Bay Area. And he's been doing this for like 10 years. And for me, he's one of those artists where I stumbled across him from another group that I was listening to. So I like got like a mixtape or something that played a song, and I kind of went, oh, I have to, look this guy up. And it was just one album after another that he's been around forever. And I'm like, how did I not know about this guy? And how did he manage to produce so many great songs in this time that I was completely unaware of him? And that was one of those tracks. It's not a new track, but it's just one of those tracks where it's like, that just nailed it for me. And I'm really excited because I have tickets to see him in June.
Very cool. Well, you have to take some pictures and post those up on Instagram.
Yeah, totally. Because I barely ever go out to live concerts anymore. And when I do, for some strange reason, I tend to go out and see more hip hop than anything else. But there's very few artists where it's like, God, I wish they'd come to my area. And when they finally do, if I'm not actually off, usually I'm out of town at a show. So this is the one time where like, oh my God, he's here and I'm in town, and it's like a perfect scenario where he's playing a record release party for somebody else. So it'll be a small venue, club venue that I get to see him at.
That will be cool, and it will be probably intimate enough that you might even be able to, get to talk with him maybe.
I'm hoping.
Yeah, very cool.
I've talked to him online on Twitter, which is the great thing about Twitter, is every once in a while you can get in touch with artists. And it's funny because we lost David Bowie in February, and that was a real gut punch for me.
Yeah.
And losing Prince just this last month was a real gut punch for me as well. Mm-hmm. And it's one of those things where you immediately start thinking, like, are there any artists left that can inspire you? Musicians that are, that can inspire you that way, I kind of feel like when you're in your teens, you can be really influenced by music.
Mm-hmm.
So, these are obviously, Prince and Bowie were artists that I discovered when I was in my teens. And I always wondered, is there any, like, will I be able to be a fan in that emotional way that I was when I was a teenager? And it kind of forced me to start looking around and looking at the artists that I do listen to now and see, like, do I feel that way? Do they inspire me artistically? And Lyrics Born is one of those artists because he's a self-made artist. He produces his own stuff. He's been pushing himself and doing it, on his own terms for a decade now. And it's one of those things where you're like, yeah, I can be inspired as an adult. I can be inspired by his work ethic, by his creativity, by his just passion to stick to it. As much as I was inspired by, whoever was doing MTV videos when I was a teenager.
Yeah.
So I think, right now he's the guy that it's like I have a little mix, of his tracks on my Google Play that I can just, if I just need energy, I know I can just hit this and I'm ready to go.
Very cool. Well, I definitely will check out Lyrics Born, and hopefully we'll be able to see those pictures also when you go to the concert. You're going, you said in May?
I think it's in June. Yeah.
June. Okay. Very cool. Well, and that really, sums it up. And I think you had alluded to somebody else that you had really influenced your life. And it's a question I normally close with is the person that most influenced your life. You had mentioned earlier that Jim Henson was a person that really inspired you in the track that you have gone. Would you say that person had the most influence on your life, or was that somebody else?
I think so. Because I see so much of how I view creativity and the world is colored through Jim Henson's work. Not just like it clearly inspired me as far as like making things with fabric, through wanting to make, puppets like Jim Henson. And wanting to make costumes for puppets, so I played with, I had puppets when I was young and I knew I had to make costumes for them. So I started to get a respect for what my mom was making for me through that. So a lot of it ties back, but also the way he worked with other creatives, how he worked. It's one of those things that really informs me when I'm struggling with like how to look at my artwork and how to, work with artists. And how to, work with a team and things like that. And it informs like how I aspire to be. So he's always, in that sense, he's always been an influence on me, because it wasn't not just his creativity, but also his passion and how he tied together so many creative people and made amazing things by working with other people. And even the definition, like my idea of a family is how Kermit was with the rest of the Muppets. Like that's, it's one of those, like, psychologically it's profound how much influence he has on me. Just because, like, so much of how I see the world is informed through the Muppet Show and the movies and, Sesame Street and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
So yeah, I would have to say he's probably the biggest influence on me.
Very cool. One last question. Have you had a chance to actually hang out with any of the Jim Henson company, or?
I have, when I was studying costume design, the shop foreman, she worked for Henson. And I was studying costume design when he passed. So I had she did costumes for Henson. So I had kind of a connection there. And I've since had the great benefit of meeting some other puppeteers that have done work. A friend of mine, Lex Rudd, is doing work, has done a couple different work jobs with Jim Henson. She was on the Jim Henson Creature Challenge, which was their like reality based show of doing puppetry design and
kind of like
craft
kind of like Face Off is for
yeah. It was they only did it once. I wish they did more of it, but it was on the Sci-Fi Channel, and it was like Face Off for 3D effects makeup. She was on the Jim Henson Challenge, where they were at the Henson Studios and doing puppets and all that kind of stuff. So, that's one of those things where anytime I get to interact with somebody who has any kind of connection with the Henson Studios or working with the puppets, that's always been, one of those things that I really, really love. And we did, I think it was Portland, like a year and a half ago. Kurt Thatcher came to the booth and picked up some Fezes. And I got to meet him, and he's directed a number of Henson projects, as well as working on Star Trek. He's really well known for his work in Star Trek, and he did work on Star Wars and a couple other things. So he's great. He's a great icon of the effects industry in general. But for me, it's oh my God, you directed Muppet movies. So that's definitely my thing. And he was one of the judges on the Creature Challenge. So it was really cool to get to meet him, and I've chatted with him a couple of times. And that's the thing, is that Henson managed to bring together the coolest, the nicest people. Mm-hmm. So every time I've had any interaction with anybody that is associated with the Henson company, it's always been an amazing experience.
Well, I think that speaks well for the type of people that he brought into the fold to, of course, see many of his ideas come to life. So, I mean, and I think, like you had mentioned earlier, with the inspiration of how he worked with individuals, and you mentioning several of the other, artists that you've worked with for some of the designs for the Fezes, I think you're kind of doing that in your own small way. So, kudos to you on that. And
thanks.
Again, Jason, thank you so much for your time. I know that we went well over the hour that we had originally talked about, and I do I really appreciate not only your time, but also going over all of your artistic thoughts and your process. And a big thank you also for what you're doing for the Collectors Hangout listeners and viewers, again, for the discount. And we will definitely make sure that they hit you up at the Phoenix Comicon or on your website and give a big shout out. So thanks again for joining us.
Thank you. It was my pleasure.
Awesome. You have yourself a great one. And again, thank you everyone for joining us live, and we will see you in the Hangout again. Have a great one.